Okay, and welcome back to another science biology lesson. No one's joined in yet, but I'm just going to record it for you guys. So, just a review of what we did yesterday, crop farming. As you can see, the learning objectives. We needed to describe and explain how glass houses and polythene tunnels can be used to increase the yield of certain crops. We mentioned yield was the amount of crops farmers want to grow. We needed to understand the reasons for pest control and the advantages and disadvantages of pesticides and biological controls with crop plants. We also started to understand the different types of fertilizers and what fertilizers are, and their benefit of increasing crop yield. So now, crop farming. So as crops grow, they remove minerals from the soil. These crops are harvested and taken away from the fields where they are grown. So if you just think of any example of a vegetable and you imagine you're a farmer. So if this process is repeated for a number of years, the supply of nutrients in the soil gets exhausted. So if you imagine now you're planting vegetables, you keep removing them, you disrupt the soil and in turn disrupt the amount of minerals. The land becomes less fertile, so plants grow poorly and produce only a small yield. So this is a problem if you're a farmer. So you need to be thinking about cost effectiveness. So farmers use something called fertilizers to put back into the soil to make sure there are enough nutrients. An organic fertilizer we mentioned yesterday was manure, which is a natural fertilizer consisting of decomposers, microbes and other small organisms in the soil. Decompose the manure to put nutrients back into the soil. And if you don't know what manure is, you can have a look at this wonderful picture. Okay, so it's saying here, this is a polythene tunnel. We did go through this yesterday. This is a polythene tunnel or greenhouse, and you can actually control the conditions of photosynthesis to increase your crop yield. So if you think about the factors, we could say temperature. We mentioned about having the optimum temperature for enzymes. And then we also spoke about the amount of water we can control, and also the amount of nutrients, the amount of carbon dioxide, etc. As long as you know the equation for photosynthesis, this will make sense to you. Now, short-wave radiation. Here, when it's cold outside, as you can see from the picture, greenhouses, they can trap heat. So short-wave radiation from the sun becomes longer radiation and it reflects off the surfaces. The long-wave radiation can't escape, so the greenhouse gases heat up. So why does this increase crop yield? So we did mention temperature previously, and obviously photosynthesis is a chemical reaction which are controlled by enzymes. So if you have the optimum temperature, which means the best temperature, obviously that will be very beneficial to the reaction itself, in turn growing your crops further, increasing the yield. Now, artificial lights can also be used to maintain long hours of light. So obviously photosynthesis is dependent upon light, sunlight. However, this is contingent upon from the sun throughout the day. Now, if we can manipulate the amount of light going through the greenhouse, we can obviously increase the yield because the plants will have more light, therefore more photosynthesis, and in conclusion, we can say that there's an increase in crop yield. The next one, burning fossil fuels increases levels of carbon dioxide. Now, like I mentioned, as long as you know the photosynthesis reaction, this will make sense to you. It's a fact of photosynthesis. Mumbling my words this morning. Okay, now moving on, defining the keywords crop pest and pesticide. So pest is something that damages your crops. As you can see, it can be insects, it can be another plant, etc. So a pesticide is something that kills the pest. So crop pest, decrease of crop yield by eating or damaging them. Pesticides are chemicals used to kill the crops. So what do you think the following kill? Herbicides. What do you think? Herbs. That's a clue. Insecticides, insects. Fungicides, fungi. Molluscus sides, if I pronounce that correctly. So if you Google this word, you'll find out what they are. Think about snails and slugs. Okay, so now pesticides. Farmers spray pesticides on crops to kill the insects that may reduce the crop yield. They also spray herbicides to kill weeds. Now, weeds are the plants that we don't want because they form competition for the crops that we want to grow. So these are unwanted plants, and some of these chemicals may remain on the surface. For example, on fruit, others may be absorbed by the plant and be present in the crop. So these are inorganic. Organic meaning natural, and pesticides are used, so you wouldn't deem those crops as organic. If you've ever been to a supermarket, you would have seen organic products. Now, there are a couple of problems using these pesticides. We mentioned they develop resistance. Other species may be targeted or may feel the effects. They're not really targeted. We're targeting the pest, but other species may be affected. Some persist in the soil and can be accumulated along the food chain. This is called bioaccumulation. So the pesticides just pass along the food chain. So one example is DDT. You can have a look. You can have a look at that example in your own time. It was actually used in the 1960s as an insecticide, and there's plenty of information about that. Now, biological control. This is not a chemical. This is a natural alternative using chemical pesticides. They're usually predators, herbivores, parasites, pathogens to control the pests. So example, the prickly pear cactus was planted in a garden in Australia in 1840. The cactus spread within a few decades and covered a large area of farmland, stopping crop plants from growing properly. So, what did farmers do to control this pest? Farmers brought an insect called the cactus moth from Argentina to Australia, and the caterpillars of this moth quickly ate all of those pests within a few years to have a decent number. So, okay, that's another go. I wonder if we can. No, can't click it. Okay. So, biological control has to be done carefully, because the introduced predator could cause more harm than good, and perhaps could be a nuisance itself. So biological control gone wrong. For example, cane beetles in Australia destroyed large areas of sugarcane crops. So then they introduced a poisonous cane toad from South America to Australia in 1935 to control the number of cane beetles. So what happened? Well, the toads, they thrived by eating other organisms and the cane beetles survived. Today, the toads are a big problem because they kill many wild animals in Australia and have also been known to kill dogs. So, by now, hopefully you'd be able to explain how glass houses and polythene tunnels were used to increase the yield, the reasons for pests, advantages, disadvantages, and understand the use of fertilizers. So that's that section completed, and I'll start a new video.